Hi everyone, my name is Harini Gopalakrishnan. So I'm with Sanofi and I lead the technology strategy for what we call evidence generation and insights analytics. And Databricks is a key component of this ecosystem that we have built. And I'm happy to be sharing that with you today, along with Martin Longpre, who's the solution architect who helped build all of what we're going to present. So the topic itself is called real-world evidence in patient analytics. It's a use case that Sanofi, we take great pride in execution. And so my first part of the talk is primarily going to be around explaining the context around what we mean by real-world evidence and data. Why is it important for a life science? And then we switch over into some of the technical elements on how we repurpose Databricks for achieving these goals. So it's going to be a quick presentation. We won't overdose you with a lot of slides. And as you can see in the agenda, it's going to be quite focused, and we will leave a lot of time for Q&A. But I hope at the end of the session, when you leave, you kind of understand what we mean by real-world evidence and data, why privacy and security are important, and how we had to customize Databricks to achieve some of these goals and our looking forward journey in the partnership together. So let's define the problem. What is real-world data and evidence, and why is it important for us, right? Essentially, real-world data, or RWD as we will call it from now on, means all the data related to patients and healthcare that are not collected as part of what we normally call a clinical trial, which is generally called an RCT or a randomized clinical trial. So potentially, it's all the data about a patient in the universe that's out there for us to tap into. The very popular ones that we often use is referred to as electronic health records that come from most of our visits to hospitals, whatever the doctor documents, and then claims, which is basically a medical claim that you file with your insurance provider. In the future, we include data from devices, your Apple Watches, weather apps, social media. So it's a very diverse and growing space. Anything that can help us inform about how the disease is progressing in the community or how patients deal with it is useful for us to mine insights from. And then real-world evidence, or RWE, is essentially then doing analytics on this diverse data to infer a certain insight, or what we call evidence. Today in our company, we have about 130 terabytes of EHR and claims, and with the multiple versions and transformations that we achieve, it adds up to about 2,000 terabytes of data that we manage in the versions and the analytics platforms that we control. So it's a huge data that we deal with. It's also unstructured because the kind of problems we mine it for is also kind of varied. So what does analysis in real world evidence really mean, right? So we said we have a lot of data. So what kind of analysis do we do with that? There is typically two kinds of analytics. The analytics is what we call conventional, which is your regular statistics code that can be canned into a program. Traditionally, they used SAS, the algorithm, the programming language to manage it. Or it can be advanced analytics, meaning you're using AI or machine learning to predict things. And this is where our implementation makes the most sense. The typical advanced analytic methodology includes all the ones that you see on the screen, essentially supervised and unsupervised learning examples. And the data that we bring in, depending upon the need and use case that we mine the insight for, it's cut into purpose, or what we call fit for purpose data. And this we typically call the analytical cohorts. And how do we use this in RWE? What are the different value chain in which we can use real world evidence, and why is it important for a pharmaceutical? Typically, RWE can influence a lot of aspects of the pharmaceutical life cycle. It can go from research to approval of drugs to even helping commercial or perform sales better. It helps, for example, find new indications, what we would call new disease areas that you hadn't thought for by looking at the nature of the data and doing some machine learning on it. You find hidden trends or patterns that you couldn't discover before. We can also find the effectiveness of this drug in the real world or market. Remember, a clinical trial is normally done in a controlled setting. The number of patients in some cases are limited. Whereas in the real world, when you look at the gamut of the insurance claims or EHR, we have a larger sized patient population. So we can actually look at the performance of a drug in the market much better by looking at various parameters coming from this data. And it can also expand labels, which is very important for a company where, for example, you have launched a drug for a certain set of approved indications. If you are able to find new indications, it can also help with expanding your label for these other unmet needs. So which is for a company like Sanofi or a pharma, it's actually pretty important use case. And real life example would be if you take Pfizer, which was in the news a couple of years ago, they were able to get a drug called Ibrance's label extended for breast cancer in men. And this, they used only real world data without having to start another clinical trial. And because they were able to do that by looking at data that already exists and not launch another costly trial, it not only provides a cost benefit, but also in a case like breast cancer for men, which is a very, very rare condition, you're not trying to recruit patients where it's very difficult to find so, because it's not something that you find a lot of patient population that are suffering from this disease. So it also helps in this case to manage these rare disease pathways. Of course, the key driver for this is generally high quality data. And that's why, like any other industry today, the data providers play a key role in our ecosystem, even from an investment standpoint. As they say, data is the new oil, and to manage such high quality data and allow people to do compute with clear security, traceability that external partners and regulators can trust, we need a platform that has certain levers and pillars, and that's what we have built in Sanofi today. Great, so let's actually look at a use case where we really applied this in a real life setting at Sanofi, if I were to use the term real again. So what you see is a indication finding use case that we based on machine learning techniques. We built an industrialized pipeline to do data engineering and to actually analyze the data and find what we call new insights. The data itself was varied. In the slide, as we can describe, it's a combination of insurance claims, data coming from labs, and RX typically means pharmacy information. We then cluster this into patient groups of a similar population. What we cluster is in fact the secret sauce, so that's why it's not revealed, but essentially the pattern helps find a similar profile of patients together. And then in the end, we are able to link it to a therapeutic area, in which case what we essentially mean is each cluster helps us identify what new indication that patient population could benefit from, which wasn't very obvious to a naked eye or traditional analytics in the past. To do this, there are different constructs. I mean, you could ask, can't we just do it in any machine learning platform? We will get into that a bit later, but there is an aspect of privacy preservation and de-identification. When we do this, remember, we're doing it at a patient population level. We don't know who the patient is. And this is something of an ethical compliance that we adhere to. And to do all of this in an industrialized scale is where we have built this ecosystem, and we also leverage Databricks as one of the components. On the right, you see this use case in more detail on what exactly we try to achieve, the number of different patients, the million patients that we analyzed, and the 2,700 characteristics we were able to mine into. But what's very important is this particular submission, or the endpoint of this result, was submitted last year for a Gartner award, and we ended up winning it. And Gartner, in fact, called our ecosystem and the use case that came with the ecosystem as innovative use of an emerging technology within life science and healthcare. So it's really pretty a good success story for us. We have been able to achieve this at scale because we are now able to reproduce these assets for other kinds of data and other kind of indications, and it is not a standalone pipeline as well. And so these are some of the elements that have gone into building this platform and the journey that has shaped it for the last 2 years. And one important point before we get into the details is at all points, because we deal with data, it's that is coming from a variety of sources, but always linked to a disease or patient. We have to take care in making sure that it is not possible for us to do it without their consent or be able to identify it or identify the individual. So we take a lot of pains in managing the data in a secure and traceable way and ensure there is governance behind it. And the important theme of this presentation and the slide and our platform is always privacy preservation. And the data should not be used beyond the intended purpose, and the governance of this usage is a must. So a lot of effort has gone into implementing that. And this is also where a partnership with Databricks is hopefully going to take us forward in some other dimensions. So what's this architecture and implementation that we talked about previously a lot, right? We set the stage on what is the use case, why it's important for pharma, what we achieve with it. So let's see on what's behind the scenes. So any aspects of evidence generation ecosystem should have four pillars, right? And the pillars that we would like to mention here is one, a data management. It doesn't just mean that we do an ELT or ETL on the data, that bring that from the sources into a cloud. We need to put good practices on keeping the pipeline agile. We have frequent refreshes of data, so we need to make sure that the version control is in place. And at the same time, we are able to code in a dynamic language, Python, or even in some cases, Java, so that we have a lot of data engineers who could tap into this raw data and create their own engineering pipelines. We have a component of analytics. As you could see, there is a diverse set of stakeholders. There are people who may prefer very traditional statistics like R or SAS, and there may be people who would like to work in PySpark. So we need to address both of these users in the ecosystem we built, keeping the security around the data uniform. The third is access control. Because a lot of the data is licensed or we buy, there is a very important element of us knowing who's accessing which data, whether they're doing the right things with the data they said they would do, and making sure that at any point in time, we can reproduce the analysis that was done. So a lot of the implementation of our customization of the platforms have gone into ensuring strict access controls on data itself. And the last is auditing and monitoring. It's not enough if you control the data, we also need to control the transformations and the derived data sets and the publications coming out of it. So it's a full end-to-end lineage where at any point in time, we can not only see the raw data, but we can also control the data access, the transformations, the derived data sets, and finally the dashboards or any other form of analytic report that goes out from these insights. And what does this really offer? So what we have built is a powerful computer that actually, as you could see, could handle billions of rows of data today. We have a complete history of all data updates. We can go back to any version of the data. We have a good traceability, and we can transform and capture the data sets. Robust security, and then we're also able to manage metadata, reference data for this particular population that we are dealing with. It's completely on the cloud. We built it on a scalable data lake, which today is based on AWS. And this is the architecture. And I will be passing it off to Marta in a second, but essentially the message here is that, as you can see, it's a complex ecosystem. We deal with different kinds of platforms and tools because we have different kinds of users that access it. We have people who just consume dashboards. So we have traditional BI and full stack based dashboards. We have scientists who would like to do traditional studies, what I refer to as conventional statistics. So we have a platform that helps them do that without having to write code and transformations in Python. And then we have our big set of advanced analytics data scientists, which is where Databricks operates the most. And here we would actually help users do with a good CI/CD bring their own models, bring their own analysis at the same time, make sure that we have the lineage and the view that I talked about. All of this is backed by a central data lake with permissions, and then we also integrate with other internal and external systems. And we have a lot of external partners who also work on the system. That being said, Martin, over to you to help deep dive into this technology and show what we did with Databricks.
Thank you, Harini. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Lompré. I'm the domain architect managing the data engineer and cloud expert team for the real-world ecosystem. So for the next 15 minutes, I will detail our real-world ecosystem infrastructure hosted on AWS, and more particularly, the integration of Databricks to support this real-world ecosystem. This real-world journey started since more than three years ago, and the main driver were to follow and use as much as possible the Sanofi standards, the AWS cloud values, and leverage automation as AWS uses and infrastructure as code for resource provisioning. Our data lake, already shown by Harini, is split in 4 different zones for better ingestion and secure process. We got a transient, raw, a trusted, and a refined zone where the data will transition from zone to zone, depending on each data type and usage. When the data is ingested, checked, and cleaned, we are then pushing it to our SaaS partner or make it available for our internal analytic and visualization application. By the way, we are not providing any direct access to our data lake based on AWS S3 bucket. All our data, mostly in flat file using Parquet and CSV, are governed by the real-world access governance. The only way to access those data is from analytic or visualization tool using our authentication service based on Azure AD groups and assume AWS IAM roles. Finally, all our data lake data were used to be ingested using most of AWS native services like AWS Glue, AWS Batch, and other services. But since the last 5-6 months, we are now migrating all those pipelines into Databricks. Before going deeper on the next slide, let's focus on our Databricks integration. Today, we have 4 different Databricks workspaces. We got 2 sandbox, one in USA and one in EMEA, and 2 production workspace also, one in US and one in EMEA. We have regional Databricks workspace to respect data licensing based on the contract we have with our different data provider, or if any data have regional restriction. Today, with those 2 main regions, we are covering all our needs and waiting for a solid use case to deploy the APAC region also. Since we have used Terraform to mostly deploy 90-95% of our Databricks workspace, a deployment in any AWS region is quite easy now. So back to the slide. Where do we use Databricks? First, for exploratory use case, where our different data science need to run AI or ML workflow, or use case that require GPU, custom libraries, and more. We're also using Databricks for cross-functional team project shared between internal and external stakeholders. For flexibility, to let users manage their own cluster, size up and size down based on their needs, and restricted by our cluster policies. By the way, we didn't open all the cluster mode, type, and driver for now for better budget management. And last but not least, for our data ingestion pipeline, managed by mostly all my teams, by migrating from AWS native services to Databricks, we evaluated a minimum of 30% of improvement in cost and productivity by using Databricks. So since the last months, we are also evaluating the usage of Delta format. Since we're already using mostly Parquet file, we think that Delta should bring us a great adding value. But we're still evaluating that with Databricks to make sure that that format can be made easily accessible to all our other consuming systems. We also made available SQL analytic feature on our sandbox workspace to have it evaluated by one of our business team who are looking for a quick ad hoc SQL query on our data lake. So now on the next 2 slides, I will share with you guys the customization we apply on our different governance requirements. Those Databricks customization are evolving regularly following new Databricks feature or use case requirements. The first one is for security. Pass-through was the main priority for us to easily manage automatically our data access and project restriction by using AD groups for data access and Databricks groups for projects, since those groups are temporary. Our project having a starting date and an ending date at the end of the project, then we delete all the different Databricks groups, and it's easy to manage like this and going back to Azure AD and request the deletion of the AD groups. Most of the DBFS paths are not available for Databricks user, except the different path needed for libraries installation and clustering script. Only for specific file extension also. We are allowing .jars, .sh, like this, we are controlling as much as we can the DBFS access system. Upload and download feature is also totally disabled based on our data restriction policies. We are providing internal file transfer tool service per user when it's needed. And we are providing also automatic mount point for on-user data and project storage access. Then GitLab integration. Our GitLab Enterprise integration was mandatory for my team at the data engineer level, and also for our data science user to process their CI/CD pipeline and code versioning. For this requirement, what we did, we have implemented the Databricks repo feature by using a permanent Git proxy cluster. we hope that Databricks will provide us a more robust feature in the next release to better fulfill this requirement instead of having a 24 hours cluster running for that kind of bridge, let's say. And we are also using cluster policies for all project and Lambda user. The main goal of those policies are provide better audit and monitoring KPIs for each project by using the cluster policy names suffix parameter, meaning that to use a custom cluster, the user needs to be in a specific Databricks project groups and apply the suffix naming on this cluster name. Those policies let us limit the cluster mode, worker, and driver type for better service usage and budget management, and to enforce specific parameters like cluster termination, pass-through activation, and more and more. Then, to end with the Databricks customization, we're not using on a regular basis the instance profile feature. Since we have almost 500 users registered on both workspace, setting up instance profile per project or per user will be a huge effort and relying on human action mostly. Pass-through provides us almost 90–95% of our requirements in an automatic way. So we're using instance profile for specific requirement. And in those cases, the cluster are set up for only one user by using the single mode or the standard mode cluster mode, and by the project owner or by my team directly. So now I will show you more kind of an owner quick tour than a demo on Databricks user access to show you the different automatic mom point, home folder access, plus other things I've already shared during this slide talk. So let's start this owner quick tour of our Databricks workspace. I use the EMEA region 1. So as you see, we're using the single sign-on feature. We keep also the admin login. So if something happened with Azure ID, at least we can connect with the single sign-on. Then when you're connecting, you are landing on the workspace Databricks landing page. You have all the menu on the left side. As I already said, you won't see the SQL analytic feature over there. It's only installed on our sandbox. So I will show you it on the sandbox. On the sandbox, we're not using the SSO, and we're not using also pass-through. So we have one big instance profile where dummy data is also over there. So user can test all the different features or other stuff like this. So if you go at the bottom here, you will see all the different menu with the SQL analytic one. So we got one business team who are testing that new feature, and we'll get back to that feature in the near future, I think. Then go back to the production one. We'll show you the cluster setup. So as I already said, we are having one GitLab cluster set up per workspace. So this is the EMEA one that provides us an access, direct access to our GitLab enterprise system. So I will show you how to connect to it. So I will use a dummy repo. I might not have changed my token in the last couple of weeks, so it might not be able to work, but at least I already have a repo within my workspace. Yeah, the token is not good, but we're already connected and using that GitLab repo to get all the different data from our GitLab repo and make it available in Databricks, let's say. And I'll go at the cluster policies. As you see, we got a lot of cluster in our system, and each project as a custom project one will be a policies for each project. And we have the user cluster policy. This is for the Lambda user. So we are setting up the different worker, the termination minute also, and each different node type and driver type available on the system. So we don't open the platform to all the different capabilities. We got the pass-through enable and the IP table and some of the AWS role and metadata role needed for the different connection. Then we see the major difference between the custom Lambda policies is the cluster name pattern. So a user needs to use the policy name in his cluster name to be able to get all the different custom setup and the different IP table. Now I will show all the different user and groups to show the difference between the data groups and the, let's say, project groups. So we have, I think it's more than, no, it's almost 500 users on the platform. So if you go on the groups menu, you will see that all the APP groups are Azure AD groups. So that is the one, our permanent groups to access in the read-only mode, the different access in our data lake. and all the other one, the APP groups one, and all the other groups are Databricks groups, starting with custom. So those one are used to add the different data science in those groups, to add the different cluster customization and be able to put their derived data or any kind of file or type of file they will need it for their different project. So we got almost 500 users, 493. So we have also using the jobs module, and you see we got some digital CRM ingestion pipeline already in place in Databricks. So we are migrating step by step our pipeline hosted in native AWS services, and data science are using that. The table menu is not really used on our from our data science as of now, so we don't have any Databricks table created. So I will go with a quick demo to show you the different months, because all the different storage access are done automatically using the /MNT. So when a user comes in the platform, you can list all the different months available in the platform. So we have data month, we'll have project month, and you have also the home user one. So also when a user connect, automatically we'll create for him a specific folder on S3 bucket. So we'll be able to access it using the /home with his email. So then we'll list all the different email home folder we got over there. I will find mine here, Martin Lompré. So I will list my home folder. We should have 1 or 2 folders over there. That's it. Yeah, I got the output data and the FTP upload data. So the main difference is those home folders are accessible only by user. So only one user can access it. They can't share anything from that folder compared to the real world data one. So now I can list the CGM UK folder. This is only in real mode. So I can find out the different release we receive from CGM. Then I will list the different table available for that specific release. We'll have all the different table over there. And for each path, you will find the Parquet file under that Parquet table with the code list. And then you will see the snappy Parquet file over there. It was a quick tour to show you how the different way our data science can access the data and the restriction we're applying. Thank you. So last slide to end this technical part of the presentation. So we are working closely with Databricks to get continuous improvement on our Databricks stack. First one is RStudio. We have between 20 and 30% of our data scientists using RStudio, but since the storage in RStudio is ephemeris, maybe AWS EFS could provide a solution for that specific request, and that we need to use only instance profile for project and data access. We are mostly refusing access for now and open it only for a specific use case and manage it totally in my team. The second most important request improvement we are working with Databricks is on propagation access right on derived data and data lineage. One main goal is to have the same access on data anywhere in Databricks workspace storage. Let's say that raw data access are managed using pass-through. That's totally perfect for direct access in read mode only. But as soon a data science or a user will derive some big tables data and copy it in other storage place, like the project month, the permission are lost and everyone can access this storage, can access the data. Databricks table, we think might bring some solution for this requirement, but not totally. And our data science are not using Databricks table for now, as you saw in the quick demo I showed you. For data lineage, we are looking in a way to have all action done on each dataset in each Databricks workflow, a kind of dataset journey where we could see the data source use, data prep, transformation, versioning, and output. So we can better manage each pipeline end-to-end in a kind of visual way. Maybe other improvement will be raised while using more and more Databricks, because we're using Databricks since 5 or 6 months only. But as of today, we are working more in a kind of partnership with Databricks than only raising our requirement. This is quite appreciated. But that's it for me. So up to you, Arini. Thanks a
lot. Thank you, Martin. And just as a wrap up on where we are today, as Martin said earlier, we are in a partnership with Databricks. It is a journey that's going to continue, and we have valid requirements that we would expect from the product that today we satisfy outside the product. And there are things that are working already really well for our data scientists. But just as a recap, we started this journey 3 years ago, where it was a traditional warehouse, and we moved that into a big data lake ecosystem managed by a couple of different cloud providers and SaaS partners. And Databricks is a new entrant that we hope to work more with them on. We have helped move our way from conventional analytics to more advanced analytics approaches, which leverages the true value of cloud and big data. So it's a huge change management as well. And in this journey, because of where we are today, we are able to generate what we call evidences in scale and in industrialized manner. And one of the pinnacle of the achievement is the external recognition that we get from agencies like Gartner. So it's been an interesting ride so far, and we hope to continue it in the future. As we wrap up, I hope you have taken at least a couple of points from our interaction, and we hope to see you back next year. And just as a ending note, all the points expressed are our individual views. It doesn't represent the Sanofi position, but it is something that we have learned and wanted to share with the set of Databricks enthusiasts. Thank you.